Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. I've been lurking on this sub for a while, but never thought I'd have my own story to share. Well, that changed last month when my new neighborhood's power-hungry board president decided to take matters into her own hands. This is going to be long, but trust me, the ending is worth it. Background. I'm a recently retired aerospace engineer, spent most of my career working on satellite communication systems. After retirement, I moved to a quiet suburban neighborhood specifically because it had excellent sky visibility. Why does that matter? Because I volunteer for a citizen science project called the Auroral Ionosphere Monitoring Network, which is partially funded by NASA and run by a major university's geophysics department. Basically, we operate ground stations that monitor disturbances in the upper atmosphere that can mess with GPS signals and satellite communications. The data we collect helps improve GPS reliability for aviation and emergency services. It's legitimate scientific research, and I take it seriously. Before I even bought the house, I did my homework. I read through every single page of the neighborhood covenants. I knew I'd need to install specialized equipment, so I submitted a detailed application to the Architectural Review Committee. This wasn't just some quick form either. I included technical drawings, a letter from the university professor leading the project explaining its scientific importance and NASA affiliation, and assurance that everything would be professionally installed to code. The board approved it without any issues. I got the signed approval form back within 2 weeks. The equipment itself looks a bit different from a regular TV satellite dish. It's a specialized helical antenna array with a software-defined radio receiver. More industrial-looking, but clearly professional-grade stuff. The installation and first contact, I had everything professionally installed about 6 months ago. The antenna array cost $12,000. The receiver and preamplifier another $8,500. Custom cabling was $1,200, and the professional calibration and installation ran $5,000. Total investment of about $27,000, most of it university property. Everything was running smoothly for about a month. I was collecting good data. The project coordinator was happy with the signal quality, and I was enjoying retirement. Then, one morning, I found a violation notice stuck to my front door. It was one of those generic, pre-printed forms with unapproved satellite dish checked off in black marker. No signature, no explanation, nothing. At first, I figured it was just a mistake. New board members probably didn't know about the approval. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I scanned my original signed approval form and the letter from the university, then sent a polite email to the entire board with the documents attached. I wrote something like, "Dear board members, I received a violation notice today. For your records, please find attached the signed approval for my ground station antenna, which is part of a scientific research project. I trust this clears up any confusion." That's when I met the new board president. Let's call her the neighborhood watch commander because that's basically what she thought she was. Enter the antagonist. This woman had apparently been elected president while I was dealing with the installation process. She's in her 60s, drives around the neighborhood in a golf cart with a clipboard looking for violations. Her husband is also on the board, which gives her pretty much unchecked power. My polite email with documentation apparently infuriated her. Instead of just saying, "Oh, we made a mistake," she took it as a personal challenge. Within a week, I got a certified letter from her claiming that my original approval was granted in error based on misleading information and that my equipment was a safety hazard. The letter gave me 72 hours to remove everything or the neighborhood association would have it removed at my expense, plus a $500 fine. I called her to try to work things out reasonably. That conversation went about as well as you'd expect. She kept saying the approval was void, that it was an eyesore and against the bylaws. When I asked which specific bylaw it violated, she just said, "I am the president and I am telling you it has to go. It's a safety issue. End of discussion." Then she hung up on me. At that point, I realized I was dealing with someone who didn't care about rules, documentation, or reason. So I decided to cover myself legally. Preparing for battle. I drafted a formal response and sent it via certified mail to every single board member's home address, plus the management company. In the letter, I laid out everything clearly. I reiterated that the antenna had been properly approved, explained that the equipment was sensitive scientific instrumentation belonging to a university research project, and provided a detailed breakdown of its value. Then I added a very specific warning. I wrote that any attempt by the association or its agents to tamper with, move, or remove the equipment would be considered willful destruction of property. I made it clear that the association would be held liable for all replacement, repair, and recalibration costs, plus legal fees. I thought that would be enough to make them back off. The equipment is expensive, it's legitimate, and I had all the documentation. What reasonable person would risk that kind of liability? Well, turns out our board president wasn't reasonable. The destruction. A few weeks later, I had to drive to the university for a required project seminar. I was gone for the entire day, which turned out to be perfect timing for what happened next. When I got home that evening, I immediately knew something was wrong. There was debris in my front yard and my roof looked damaged. As I got closer, I realized what had happened. Someone had ripped my antenna array completely off the roof. They hadn't just carefully removed it. They'd used brute force, tearing up a section of roof shingles and leaving gouges in the wood underneath. The specialized coaxial cables had been cut with what looked like bolt cutters. The entire antenna array, all $27,000 worth of precision scientific equipment, was lying mangled in my rose bushes. I was furious, but my engineering background kicked in. Before I did anything else, I needed to document everything. I spent the next hour taking over 200 high-resolution photos from every possible angle. I photographed the roof damage, the cut cables, the destroyed equipment, everything. Then I walked across the street to my neighbor's house. This neighbor had never liked the board president's authoritarian attitude, and I had a feeling they might have seen something. Sure enough, they had recorded the entire incident on their phone. The video showed the board president and some younger guy, probably her nephew, climbing onto my roof with a crowbar. They spent about an hour up there, clearly having trouble with the professional mounting hardware. Eventually, they just used brute force to rip everything loose, throwing the equipment into my yard before climbing down and driving away, going nuclear. At that point, I knew this wasn't just about neighborhood politics anymore. This was criminal destruction of property, and I was going to treat it as such. First, I called the police non-emergency line and filed a report. When the officer arrived, I handed him a folder containing the original approval form, my certified warning letter, the itemized cost breakdown, and a copy of the video. His whole attitude shifted when he realized this was nearly $30,000 worth of destroyed equipment, not just some neighbor dispute. Then I called the university. The project coordinator was absolutely livid. Apparently, losing my station had created a critical gap in their monitoring network during a period of high solar activity. They were potentially going to lose weeks of important data. That's when things got interesting. The university has a legal department specifically for protecting research grants and assets. They partnered with my personal lawyer and sent a demand letter via courier to both the association and the board president personally. The letter was beautiful. It demanded full replacement cost of the equipment, professional roof repair, the cost of flying in a specialist to install and calibrate the new system, damages for lost scientific data, and all legal fees. The total came to over $55,000. The letter also made it clear that they had video evidence and a police report, and that they would sue both the association as a corporate entity and the board president individually for acting in bad faith and outside her authority. The fallout. The response was immediate. The other board members went into panic mode when they realized what their president had done. They contacted the association's insurance company, which reviewed the evidence and informed them that they would likely deny the claim for the president's personal liability. Her actions were intentional and malicious, not simple negligence. The board called an emergency meeting for all homeowners. I showed up but stayed quiet in the back. The board explained the situation, and my neighbor played the video of the president on my roof with a crowbar. You could hear the collective gasp when people realized what they were watching. The homeowners were furious, not at me, but at the president. Her personal vendetta had exposed everyone to massive financial liability that could drain the reserve fund and require a special assessment. Every homeowner in the neighborhood could end up with a bill because of her actions. The vote to remove her from the presidency was unanimous. She tried to argue and defend herself, but the video was pretty damning evidence. The association's lawyer informed her that she was personally liable for damages not covered by insurance, resolution, and aftermath. The insurance covered some of the basic property damage, but the association had to pay the rest from their reserve fund. I received a check for the full amount within a month. I hired the best roofing company in the area and arranged for the university to send an upgraded version of the antenna system. The new board president formally apologized in writing and asked me to help draft a bylaw amendment protecting privately maintained scientific research equipment within the community. The amendment passed without opposition. The former president ended up having to take out a second mortgage to pay her share of the settlement. Her house went up for sale about 2 months later. I heard through neighborhood gossip that she moved to a different state. Current status. I'm writing this while sitting on my back porch, watching the professional crew install the new ground station equipment. It's actually better than what I had before. The university upgraded several components as part of the replacement. I got an email this morning from the project coordinator thanking me for my persistence and noting that the new equipment is already providing the cleanest data in the entire network. The research project is back on track, and my station is contributing valuable information to improve GPS reliability. The best part? The neighborhood is actually much more peaceful now. The new board focuses on actual community issues instead of power trips. Several neighbors have told me they're glad someone finally stood up to the previous president's authoritarian behavior. Looking back, I think the whole situation could have been avoided if the former president had just checked the documentation instead of letting her ego take over. But I'm glad it happened the way it did. Sometimes bullies need to learn that their actions have consequences, especially when they mess with legitimate scientific research. The lesson here is pretty simple. Do your homework, document everything, and don't underestimate quiet people who know their rights. And definitely don't mess with equipment that has NASA's name attached to it. I'll post an update if anything else interesting happens, but I think this story is pretty much over. The former president learned an expensive lesson about the difference between authority and power, and I got better equipment out of the deal. Anyone else dealt with power-hungry board members who think they're above the rules? I'd love to hear your stories. Update. The saga continues and finally ends. Wow, this post really blew up. Thanks for all the support and the awards. A lot of you asked for updates, and boy do I have some interesting developments to share. The criminal case first. The big news. The former board president was actually charged criminally. The police detective handling my case did a thorough investigation and found that she had a pattern of similar behavior in her previous neighborhood. Apparently, she'd been forced to resign from another association board after some incident involving unauthorized tree removal from someone's property. She was charged with felony destruction of property and criminal trespassing. Her nephew, who helped her, got charged as an accomplice. The prosecutor was particularly interested in the premeditation aspect. My certified warning letter proved she knew exactly what she was doing and the potential consequences. The case went to trial last month. My neighbor's video was the star evidence, and it was pretty devastating. You could clearly see her directing the destruction and even laughing at one point when they threw the antenna into my roses. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. She was convicted on both charges. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in county jail, suspended, 2 years probation, and ordered her to pay full restitution. The nephew got community service and probation. Both of them now have felony records. The civil lawsuit resolution. The civil case wrapped up around the same time. My lawyer and the university's legal team were absolutely ruthless. They didn't just go after the former president. They went after the entire association board for failing in their fiduciary duty to stop her. The final settlement was actually higher than our original demand. The association's insurance company ended up paying the maximum policy limit, and the former president had to cover the rest personally. The total came to about $78,000 when you include all the legal fees and additional damages. But here's the really satisfying part. The association's insurance company dropped them completely after the settlement. They couldn't find new coverage for almost 6 months, and when they finally did, their premiums tripled. Every homeowner in the neighborhood got hit with a special assessment to cover the increased costs. Neighborhood dynamics. The best part has been watching how the neighborhood has changed. The former president's cronies who used to enable her power trips have been completely marginalized. Several of them resigned from various committees after facing backlash from other homeowners. The new board is actually functional now. They focus on real issues like road maintenance and community events instead of measuring grass height and counting mailbox flowers. They even asked me to serve on the Architectural Review Committee, which I politely declined. I've had enough of association politics for one lifetime. My next-door neighbor, who was always friendly but quiet, told me something interesting. Apparently, the former president had been harassing multiple people in the neighborhood for years. She'd forced one family to remove a vegetable garden, made another repaint their house twice because the color was too bold, and had been systematically targeting anyone who didn't attend her social events. Several neighbors have thanked me for standing up to her. One elderly gentleman said I saved the neighborhood from a tyrant. That might be a bit dramatic, but I appreciate the sentiment. The research project update. The new equipment has been running flawlessly for 3 months now. The university coordinator sent me a really nice thank you letter explaining how my station's data has contributed to 2 published research papers. One of them was about GPS disruption patterns during solar storms, which has practical applications for aviation safety. I also got invited to present at a conference about citizen science projects. It was pretty cool talking to professional researchers about the work we're doing. Several other universities have reached out about setting up similar monitoring stations in different regions. The best part is that my station is now considered the reference standard for the entire network. The upgraded equipment they installed is being used as a model for other installations, so in a weird way, the former president's destructive actions ended up advancing the research. Personal vindication. Last week, I got a call from someone who identified himself as a reporter for the local newspaper. Apparently, the criminal trial had attracted some attention, and they wanted to do a feature story about citizen science and property rights. The article came out yesterday, and it's pretty flattering. They interviewed the university coordinator, the new association president, and several neighbors. The former president declined to comment, probably on advice of her lawyer. The headline was, "Retired Engineer's NASA Project Survives Neighborhood Battle." They even included a photo of my new antenna installation and explained how the research contributes to GPS reliability. My wife says I looked like a distinguished scientist in the photo, which made me laugh. The final twist. But here's the absolute best part, and I saved it for last because it's almost too perfect to believe. 2 months ago, I got a call from someone at NASA headquarters, not the university, but actual NASA. Apparently, they'd heard about the incident through the research network and wanted to understand what happened. It turns out that my data had contributed to a critical safety advisory about GPS disruption that was issued to commercial airlines last year. The NASA official explained that citizen science stations like mine are becoming increasingly important for space weather monitoring, especially as we rely more heavily on satellite technology. Then he asked if I'd be interested in participating in an expanded monitoring program with additional funding and equipment upgrades. The new program would involve installing even more sophisticated equipment and taking on a more formal role in the research network. I said yes, obviously. So next month, I'm getting another equipment upgrade, this time funded directly by NASA. The new installation will be about twice the size of what I have now, with multiple antenna arrays and a dedicated computer system. It'll be worth over $100,000. The irony is beautiful. The former president tried to get rid of one small antenna because she thought it was an eyesore. Now I'm getting a much larger, more visible installation that's officially sanctioned by NASA. The new association board was thrilled when I told them about it. Apparently, having a NASA research station in the neighborhood is considered a selling point now. Lessons learned. Looking back on this whole experience, I've learned a few things. 1. Documentation is everything. If I hadn't kept meticulous records of the approval process and sent that certified warning letter, this could have ended very differently. 2. Never underestimate the power of legitimate authority. The university's legal department and NASA's involvement turned this from a neighborhood dispute into a serious matter that got everyone's attention. 3. Bullies usually have a pattern of behavior. The former president's previous incidents in her old neighborhood helped establish that this wasn't just a one-time mistake. 4. Sometimes standing up to unreasonable people benefits everyone, not just yourself. Multiple neighbors have told me how much better the community atmosphere is now. 5. Karma might take a while, but it's usually worth the wait. Final thoughts. I never wanted to become the neighborhood's guy who fought the association, but I'm glad things worked out the way they did. The research project is thriving, the community is more peaceful, and I've got some great stories to tell. The former president moved out of state, so I doubt I'll ever see her again. I heard through the grapevine that she's living in a condo community with very strict rules about modifications and installations. Somehow that seems fitting. As for me, I'm enjoying retirement and contributing to legitimate scientific research. The new NASA program is going to keep me busy for years to come, and I'm excited about the expanded role. Sometimes life throws you curveballs, but if you handle them right, you can end up in a better place than where you started. The former president thought she was teaching me a lesson about who was in charge. Instead, she ended up learning that actions have consequences, especially when you mess with someone who does their homework. Thanks again for all the support and comments. This community has been amazing, and I'm glad my story could provide some entertainment and maybe inspiration for others dealing with unreasonable authority figures. Keep fighting the good fight, everyone. And remember, never mess with someone's NASA project. Edit. A few people have asked about the specifics of the research project. I can't share too many details for security reasons, but if anyone is interested in citizen science projects, check with your local universities. There are lots of opportunities to contribute to legitimate research, and it's incredibly rewarding work. Edit 2. To answer the most common question, yes, the antenna installation is quite visible from the street now. It looks very professional and scientific, which I think adds character to the neighborhood. Several neighbors have said it makes them feel like they're living next to a real scientist, which is flattering even though I'm just a retired engineer with a hobby. Final edit. My wife insisted I add that she's proud of how I handled everything and that she never doubted we'd come out on top. She also wants everyone to know that our roses have completely recovered from having expensive scientific equipment thrown into them. They're actually blooming better than ever this year. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I am not sure if this is pro-revenge, so I will let you all decide. If not, let me know and I will move it. I will say in advance sorry for the long one, but the backstory is relevant. Back in the early 2010s, I started working for a big internet-based company in the UK. The company was opening a new office with a new subdivision in London. When I started, there were 2 team leaders and the office manager. The 2 teams were the content team and the SEO, search engine optimization team. I was recruited to be the development team lead, that is, web development. When I was interviewed for the job, both the office manager and SEO team lead were carrying out the interview. As you do in interviews, when they asked if this or that could be done, I would respond, yes, of course, or, you would get a better result doing X, Y, or Z. So I got offered the job, and for the first year there was so much going on. As well as building a team, I also had a portfolio of websites that needed to be redeveloped and redesigned. It was at this point that some red flags started to pop up. I would have the SEO team lead, we will call him Andy, coming to me and telling me that I needed to do things the way he wanted. I would always push back and say no, and give a reason why I was doing things the way I was. Andy would get irate and would complain to the office manager about me. When the office manager would ask me about it, I would explain what had happened and why I had said no, and the office manager would leave it there because at the end of the day, I was the one with the experience in web development, not Andy. This happened a few times over the first year, and I then realized that the reason that Andy was getting so irate was because he thought that I would be a yes man to him. Sorry, buddy, that is not who I am. So, now that we have the backstory, let's get into what led to the revenge. Me and the team had been working hard to get 2 of the new websites completed, and I was due to show them off to the board before they went live. This company's head office was in another part of the country, and I had to leave the office in London at about lunchtime. So, I arrived to the hotel that is across the road from the head office about 4 p.m. and jump on my laptop to start going through the sites to run some tests. I was testing functionality, making sure the look and feel were correct, things like that. Then it happened. We found a major bug that caused a major issue with the functionality of the website. So it is at this point that I am going to introduce the star of our story, Johnny, not real name, but attacked all the same, who was my senior developer. Me and Johnny working through the night, me in the hotel room and him in the London office. We finally fixed the bug, about 7 a.m. the following day. My meeting with the board was at 10 a.m., so after getting showered, feed, and over to the office, I started my day with 0 hours sleep. I go into the meeting, and the first thing that is said is the CEO asking if I was okay. I had met him a few times, and he was a really nice guy. I explained that we had found an issue with the sites yesterday, and me and Johnny had worked through the night to fix it before the meeting. Long story short, everyone was really impressed and loved the new sites. At the end of the meeting, the CEO pulled me aside and thanked me for everything and then told me to go home and get some sleep. It was about a 3-hour train ride to London and then another hour home. I thanked him and went on my way, so after taking my team out for a well-deserved lunch to say thank you. The office manager then organized a night out for the whole office to celebrate on the following Friday. We started off at a fancy bar, not my sort of thing. I am a man of cheap tastes. And then everyone moves on to a small club. I go to the club for a bit, but then leave quite early in the night as I need to get a train home. I say my byes and then head home. I come into the office on the Monday and there is something going on. I speak with Emma, not real name, the content team's lead. She does not know what is going on, but there are people from head office, HR, and others. Then a few minutes later, all the team leaders are called into a meeting. We are all squished in one of the small meeting rooms. There is office manager, 2 members of the HR team from head office, and the 3 team leaders, including myself. So, HR explained that there has been a complaint made against Johnny. A member of the SEO team, we will call him Mark, had called Andy on the Friday saying that Johnny had been making racist comments while everyone was out at the club. Both myself and Emma were taken aback. This was not like Johnny. On a side note, I felt that I need to explain the races of people involved. This is just for context and not an attack on anyone involved. Johnny, Emma, and I are white British. Andy is African, born in Britain, I believe. And Mark is Indian, once again, I believe. So, the whole day was spent with HR doing interviews with the other people that were there that night, and we then all reconvened towards the end of the day. The result of the interviews were that no one had heard anything like what Mark was saying, so it was Mark's word against Johnny's. This was not acceptable for Andy. He wanted Johnny fired and cried, "We could not have someone like that in the office." So both Emma and I looked at each other, and though that it was strange that he was so instant on firing Johnny with no evidence, both the office manager and HR agreed, and Johnny was let off with a warning and to be aware in the future of how things he says that could be misinterpreted. Life went back to normal in the office, that is, until about 2 months later. The story of what had happened had gone round the office, about 12 people. Then one afternoon, I was pulled aside by one of the guys on the content team, and he said that he had overheard Andy and Mark talking and thought I should know. We went into one of the meeting rooms, and he laid everything out. What I heard made my blood boil, and I think had I been in a cartoon, steam would have been erupting from my ears. He told me that the racism complaint was faked and a plan that Andy had to attack my team because I would not bend to his demands. Him and Mark on a call outside the club. Andy was not there that night. And that is when he heard what they were doing. It later came out that their plan was to make the complaint against Johnny and get him fired, which would then lead on to Andy complaining that I was not fit to run a team if I let that sort of this happen under my leadership. My first question was why he didn't bring this up with HR in the interviews. He said that he did, but it was his word against both Andy and Mark. I thanked him for this and went on with what I was doing. I was pissed! There was no way that I was going to let this slide, but I knew that if I was going to go after them, I needed to have everything in place beforehand. I didn't tell Johnny what I had been told and asked the guy that told me to keep it to himself for now. I didn't want Johnny to get pissed off and do something that would get him fired or worse, affect any revenge I could dish out. So I watched. I watched everything the SEO team did and didn't do. Then it happened. It was like angels had descended from heaven to deliver me the winning lottery ticket. The building we were in was a 3-story building with a main stairwell with a door on each floor to the offices. The stairwell also led to a door out to the street. At the time, I was a casual smoker and used it to get a break from the screen and clear my head if something I was working on was not going well. So I walk out of the door to the office and into the stairwell, and who is there? Mark of all people. He is on the phone, and he goes white as a sheet when he sees me. Now he is mid-sentence with the person on the other end of the phone, and as I am walking past, he is forced to carry on the conversation. I overhear, and from what he is saying, I can tell that he is talking to a school or something like that. The conversation sounding like he was looking for information about applying and about a visa. I thought that was a strange call to be having, and something was fishy about it. I had my suspicions as to what was going on, but nothing concrete at this time. A few days later, I was heading back up to the head office, and by that time, we had a new office manager who lived near the head office, so was based there most of the time. When I got there, I dropped my things off at the hotel and headed over to the office. I went to his desk and asked to have a quick chat. I explained to him what I had overheard Mark talking about on the phone and said that maybe the company might like to look at his visa status. So a week went by and nothing seemed to happen. Then, bam! He stopped showing up to the office. A few days later, I got told what had happened from one of the other SEO team members. Mark had been fired with immediate effect for no longer having the correct visa to work in the UK. The company did not want to get involved in sponsoring a new visa for him. I don't know why. I started asking questions around the office, random chit-chat, and I found out that Mark is from Dubai, and he was here on his wife's student visa. I don't know how that works, but it was all above board. I also found out that his wife's course had finished, and that left them with a small window of time to get a new visa. That is when it all clicked. Now, there are some doggy people in London and everywhere else, and they would set up these fake collages that would sign people up to get visas to live and work into UK. At some point before or after this, saw a program on this, and normally these were set up in tiny offices that you couldn't swing a cat in, let alone be a collage. They were used as postal addressed for the collage, and they would charge a course fee to be enrolled and thus be able to apply for a student visa. So, what Mark was trying to do is to get enrolled in one of these collages so that he could stay in the UK and carry on working. I found out a few weeks later that Mark and his wife did have to leave the UK and go back to Dubai because he didn't have any money coming in to pay for his new collage course. Bye, Mark! When I found out that Mark had been let go, I pulled Johnny aside and filled him in on everything. He could not believe it, and was stunned that they would try and do that. I apologized to him as it was my fault that he had been targeted by them in a way to get at me. He would not accept it and said that I had gone above and beyond in defending him. Following on from this, I made it quite clear to Andy that I know what he and Mark had done, and I would not be forgetting it, and to watch his back. I made sure we were not in earshot of anyone else. About 2 months later, Andy handed in his notice and left the company, never to be seen or heard from again. I have told this story to some people over the years, and I have been asked so many times if I feel guilty for what I did. I always respond the same way. I feel guilty that Johnny was wrongfully accused and targeted. I don't feel guilty about what I did to Mark. You don't mess with my friends, family, or team. Anyway, thank you for watching.